Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Sunny Harajly to the show. What's up there, Sunny?
What's going on, Keith? Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks, dude, for joining me here, and this is going to be a great conversation. I've certainly been following you, Sunny, for many years on the forums. I think a lot of folks might remember you as Sunny X, or the rimless reef guy. But just a little bit more background on Sunny. He's been reefing now for 25 plus years. His systems have always favored carbon dosing, and we'll certainly talk about that tonight for leveraging bacteria for coral growth. He started experimenting with carbon dosing back in 2004, and around 2007 he helped it gain some traction in the hobby. He was also featured in Coral Magazine at the time, as well as many other online and physical publications due to his success with carbon dosing. The systems he's set up have been featured as Tank of the Month on all the big sites, ReefCentral, Reef to Reef, and others. For a time, he had a coral company up and running. A lot of folks might remember Pro Corals, which released some classic corals such as the PC Rainbow. I've got the PC Rainbow. And I've also got the PC Superman table, another favorite of mine. So you may also recall seeing Sunny's very well-known rimless reef tank. And today, Sunny chronicles his reef keeping journey via the website reefsite.com. So before we start chatting with Sunny, I just want to thank the sponsor for this show, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. Really appreciate them supporting the live stream and the show. And I also appreciate all you folks out there tuning in. So don't forget, hit that like button. Got to hit that like button so more people can find the stream. And while you're at it, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, that would be awesome. I appreciate it. We're getting very close to 20,000 subscribers, so I can taste it. Very, very, very close. So I see there's a bunch of folks already in the live stream, and as usual, comments and questions are always welcome. be great to have this be an interactive discussion to make it a lot more engaging and interesting and fun. So, Sonny, man, I mentioned that you've been in the hobby for 25 plus years. How did it all start for you in terms of this reef keeping journey?
6 years old, I got into just a standard freshwater. Started doing that, and got into a few different things. Started doing some South American, aquariums with Oscars, Jack Dempsey's, things of that nature. Stepped it up a bit with the African cichlids as I got a little older. And then, about 13, 14 years old, got into a reef tank. Was in school. They had one set up with just some basic clownfish, small anemone, and kind of bug bit me right there. And then from then on, I just devoured every, publication, any book I could get a hold of, and just dived right in. It was, I mean, as you know, from back in those days, there wasn't a whole lot out there to really look at online or to see, especially in the early to mid 90s. So kind of grew up from there in the hobby, and just kind of threw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks, sort of thing.
Peter T says, I recognize that tank. I've been using Sunny's do-it-yourself coral snow, which we were talking about before the live stream.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the coral snow. Did you have anybody that you tried to emulate in terms of a veteran reef keeper? You mentioned you did a lot of reading and what have you, but was there anyone in particular that you tried to mimic their methods?
Even now and back then, I took a lot from all the reefers around me. I try to take a small piece from everybody. One person may have a particular method with their lighting. One person may have something particular with their feeding, with their flow, and try to take little bits and pieces of everybody's successes and make it my own. So, on ReefCentral, I'd follow certain guys. I don't know if you remember, like JBNY.
Yeah. Joe Berger.
Yep. He had a beautiful, Joe Berger. He had a beautiful setup. Loved his. Mountain Dew Man. You remember Mountain Dew Man? He was, for the longest time, he was on the cover of the Reef Crystals on the little box.
Yeah.
That old school picture.
Okay.
Rob Sion, Rob's. He had a beautiful, I think it was a 90-gallon aquarium. There's your aquariums as well, looking at your things and kind of taking a little bit from everybody, kind of learning and following the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just you get when you do all that research on it and try to like learn up and bone up on the different methods to use for reef keeping, you do see certain tanks that just kind of catch the eye, and yeah, it's sort of like natural to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna try to like mimic those methods and try to replicate that success, and that's always it's a good thing. I always think in this hobby for people that are just starting out or people that kind of want to take it to the next level is to try to find that mentor, so to speak. It doesn't have to be somebody that you actually talk to or get advice from, but at least if you kind of follow that person, whether it's on social media or wherever they're writing articles or what have you, it's a lot of information that you can kind of take in, and that's always I think a valuable thing, especially these days where there's a lot of different opinions out there, a lot of noise, and social media can kind of get a little distracting.
Yeah, I try to, I do have the Instagram page and I've got the Facebook page where I'll post and put things on there, but I've kind of shied away from some of the groups on there and posting. There seems to be, like you said, there's a lot of noise out there, for lack of better terms, where you may present something out there and get a lot of flack or certain feedback that isn't really conducive to conversation. So
yeah, it sometimes you gotta know what not to pay attention to. So man, you Pro Corals, that was like an awesome little operation you had going on. How did that kind of emerge from you were obviously a hobbyist and you kind of you kind of turned pro, so to speak, right? Turned into a business.
I had that larger tank. I think it was a 225 in wall. The reef tank of the month out there in ReefCentral back in 06.
Let me see. You sent me a picture of that here. That's it right there. That's a lot of people probably recognize that tank.
Yeah, that was a really nice setup. Metal haloids, 5 foot by 3 feet. Had 2 of those Luminarc 3s in there. Ran XM 10Ks and then XM 20Ks for a while. Some VHO lighting, that beautiful blue glow. And so had that tank going, took it down in favor of something smaller. Life was getting busy. So that's when I set up that 100-gallon rimless. I'd also been looking around and wanted to try something new. You go from tank to tank and you just want to evolve and not kind of do the same thing over and over again. So I was really getting interested in what the Germans were doing with their aquariums and the way they had things set up, and also the Japanese with some of the bonsai style of their setups, more so with the freshwater. And, hey, why don't we take something and maybe incorporate that look, that clean, negative space into a reef aquarium? You weren't really seeing too many of them back then. So, yeah, that was about '06. I decided to move everything over to that setup. Now, taking down the much larger tank, I had a lot of corals that I had to get, offload. And just, started selling them here or there, $20 a frag, $30 a frag. And, quickly had a bunch of money coming in, enough so to fund the new setup entirely. And so I set up the other tank, had that going, and that was still in the back of my mind, concerning the sale of the corals and growing them. And I, do it quite well at the time. And so when the 100-gallon was set up and it was doing well and it kind of started growing out, I had quite a bit of demand from people who wanted corals for my setup.
I'm showing the 100-gallon rimless right now.
Yep. I think it was specifically more so that, especially back then, '06, '07, yes, a lot of local fish stores had corals, but there weren't a lot of online shops. I can only name a few, maybe.
Now, what year was this?
This was like '05, '06.
Yeah.
What was it? There was like Reefer Madness.
Yeah. Reefer Madness is
some
the
of the
bomb, man.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, some of the Tyree stuff, you'd have to get on a long list. I think Garf also had some stuff going on as well. So there weren't many avenues. And who was the other one out in LA? Was it ATL? They had some beautiful corals. Shades of Fall and a few of those other Strawberry Fields. Some beautiful things. And so I guess more so than anything, people wanted corals from somebody that somebody they trusted, and corals that were aquacultured and knew that they weren't going to die. You weren't going to spend all this money on something. It's something that's been tested. It's been in the system, and more so, it's guaranteed to do well in your environment.
So Pro Corals, what am I? PC Rainbow. PC Rainbow. You said to me before when we were talking before the earlier this week, I think, that there was an interesting story behind that coral.
Yeah, that coral. I got it off a. It came in on a rock, and
it came in on a rock.
Yeah, it came in like off the side of a rock. I was starting to import corals, and we were getting them, coming in fresh out of the box, which was a whole new experience in itself. I mean, you get these corals, you don't know what's in there. You dip all these, maricultured corals that are on these little bases. Yeah. So you dip all this stuff, and like the whole ocean crawls out of these things. All sorts of creatures you've never seen before. But yeah, this thing was just on the side of one of the maricultured rocks, and sat in my tank forever. Didn't do much. I don't even know how I noticed it. It just started to pop out of the rock work, and then one day it just, moved it over to the right location. It was, I believe, after I switched from metal halides to T5s that it really started to grow. It, took on a red coloration and then started to develop these other colors that you see today.
It is a gorgeous coral. It's like my colony. I've got a huge colony of it in one of my display tanks. It's pretty much all red, bright red.
Yeah.
But then when I take frags of it and I put it in my frag tank, it will develop kind of like that rainbow of colors, the green and kind of like the yellowish at the base when it's starting to encrust. So it's pretty wild that it looks so different as a colony for me at least versus like frags once they start encrusting. Yeah,
mine it's kind of finicky with, like you said, moving around. I know my colonies, I've got a few in this system now, and it's really hard to get it exactly right because I've got one, maybe in the upper right hand section of the aquarium where it's just all red. There's very little other coloration, any rainbow in it. But then the one in the center, it's got the classic colors going in there. So it's kind of hard to gauge exactly where you need it in the system, but some corals are like that.
And the another one of my favorites from you is the PC Superman table.
Yeah, that thing, it came in on a wild box that came through, and it came from Australia, I believe, of all places. And we knew we had a hit as soon as we opened that box up, and I saw it, and it's just incredible. I've got an original picture on the Reef site website of the mother colony. It's really cool. I mean, that thing just came out just beautiful
How do you,
right out of the
how did,
box.
so, when back then, when you're importing coral, as you mentioned, you were dipping all the, like the maricultured stuff and what have you, but obviously acro-eating flatworms, you got the eggs and what have you. Were you snipping like those corals
Yep.
off of the
Yep.
bases and dipping and,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, we were dipping, taking all the bases off. Um, Later on, the rainbow, had been on one of the bases that we had kept in one of the quarantine systems, because there were some corals that we would keep back there. But anything that went into the displays or was going to be sold was moved into a separate system. It wasn't anything really massive. In the beginning, it was 8 foot by 4 foot, you know, 1 foot high aquarium where we would list everything out, kind of stage them of how we should go out and sell them. Maybe not too different than what you do now, because I know that you sell them as well. You've got quite a few nice pieces. I believe I've purchased some stuff from you years
Oh,
ago.
really?
Yeah, nice colony. Yeah, it was a while ago, but yeah.
So did you like have to rent some space, or did you do all this out of the house?
I did everything out of the
Really?
house. Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest issue I had was never having enough corals. Uh, you'd get the stuff in, and it'd be gone, and you'd have waiting lists, and just people just always wanted the corals.
So this was all basically born from breaking down that larger tank.
Yeah, broke down a larger tank, and then I started just getting corals, shipping in, and the one of the largest sources of corals, believe it or not, was just locally. It's this. I mean, I have a problem right now. I've got corals I don't know what to do with,
Yeah.
because things are growing so quickly, and it gets to the point where it's a pain because you have to go in there and frag them just to maintain the aesthetics. And you start asking around, and there's plenty of people who have these incredible aquariums, and they have grow out sections in their basement. So I had quite a few local suppliers as well. And I'm sure Todd and Brett over at Cherry
Yeah.
Corals. I've known those guys forever. They're right down the street from me. So there's a lot of hobbyists, and everybody was kind of drawing from the same well because they were coming up right around the same time.
So what are you doing these days, man? I mean, when you got excess corals, you just bringing in cherry corals, or you like selling stuff and offering the on the side or trading?
Yeah, I don't really sell anything nowadays. I've got quite a few people who are getting into the hobby, and so I just give them away to them, let them get started, let them get going. Probably pretty soon. I know I'd mentioned it a few times on my Instagram site. Just start offering up stuff. If some reefers want to pay for shipping, I'm just gonna get them out there, get them moving out to the people. I think it's good, especially as expensive as this hobby
Yeah.
is. It's nice to give others opportunity
That's
to get
awesome, man.
corals where
That's awesome.
otherwise they wouldn't be able to get them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was going to ask you. So you took a large break from the hobby. Do you mind sharing why you ended up taking that break between tanks?
Yeah, yeah, that was I'd finished the first two tanks and set up the third one. The third one was larger than the other ones. It was a 6 foot by 3 foot rimless. Had a beautiful, had a coast to coast overflow on the right hand side. Had a lot of nice custom work done by Miracles Aquariums out in Toronto, Canada. And I got that tank set up, had that going, had the Pro Corals was doing really well, going well, making new connections. And yeah, ended up getting sick. Came down with cancer. Ended up with lymphoma, leukemia, and because of that, I had to get out of the hobby. It really tore me up to sell everything off and kind of get rid of everything. I kept most of the equipment in storage, but due to the chemotherapy and the medications and not having an immune system for the first year,
Yeah.
I really couldn't touch it. The entire treatment was 3 years, and after I'd gotten through with it, I tried to dabble or jump back into it. I just could never really fully commit to it. It was maybe 5, 6 years after my initial diagnosis that I finally decided to jump back into the hobby full force and get it going. It was during COVID. I ended up setting up a small 40-gallon reef tank in my office, as a lot of people did. You're at home. I'm up there working. Got a little empty spot there. What am I gonna do with it? I'm like, all right, I got a reef. Let me get this set up. I put it together, let it go, and it grew out pretty well, did good. And then I set up this guy back here almost a year ago, a little bit 13 months ago.
Well, listen, man, I am so sorry that you had to go through that, but you know, it sounds like you're in a good place right now, and
Yeah.
you know, more power to you, man, for battling through that and for beating that thing. And it's great to see you back into the hobby, because I know a lot of people probably sorely miss seeing your tanks, especially the rimless reef.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to be back. You know, if nothing else, you know, it made me a better person, kind of made me a bit stronger, and you
It's
know, jumping
inspirational.
back into reefing.
Inspirational.
Yeah. Yeah. Reefing was, you know, jumping back into it. It's part of my life. You know, it's really, it's been therapeutic for me. It's a great challenge. It's for me, you know, it's art, it's an art form, and it just, you know, just makes me happy. That's all I can say.
That's what, you know. Listen, it's different things for different people, but you know, therapeutic. You know, it's a great hobby that we have here, and you know, yeah, there's always challenges, right, in terms of the hobby itself, and can be very
Oh yeah.
frustrating, and you've got to have a lot of resilience, and obviously you do have a lot of resilience, but you know, there's always something with a reef tank in terms of
Yeah.
challenges, right?
I think a lot of it is just, I hate to say it, but a lot of it is the reefers themselves sometimes. You're your own worst enemy. People just, you know, I don't test much. I don't like to chase numbers at all. You know, even now, the only things I really keep an eye on is my pH, the temperature of the aquarium, and I'll test my alkalinity once a month. That's it.
Really.
Some people are surprised to hear that. Uh, I'll keep an eye out on the glass, see how quickly it's, you know, it's getting dirty. I'll take a look at the corals, see if they're lightening up, darkening, how things are growing. If everything is chugging along and doing well, I don't really mess with anything, honestly, because I've really hurt myself in the past chasing those numbers, trying to make adjustments where, you know, my pH was at 0.05 or zero point 0.5, and I needed a 0.03, that magic number. And no, it's caused me more problems than I, you know, care to say.
Well, here's the latest tank, right? The 1 year growth shot
Yeah.
of your current rimless reef. And how big is that tank there, Sonny?
This one's a water box 6025, so it's 5 by 2 by 2.
5 by 2 by 2.
So, yeah,
Um,
and with the sump, yeah.
so I mean, yeah, it's talk to us in terms of the setup. You know, in testing. We'll get back to the testing stuff, but talk to us about the setup for the current tank in terms of lighting, equipment, and all that fun stuff.
All right. So the current tank, as mentioned, it's a water box. For the lighting, I decided to go with LED. I had, it was my first time using it a couple years back when I set up that little office tank, the 40
Uh-huh.
gallon, and it did really well. You know, I've done, you know, power compacts, haloids, VHOs, T5s. I've done it all, and just wanted to give LEDs a try. It was something different, something new. I still have all the metal haloid and the ATI equipment in the garage from the old
Yeah.
tanks. I've got those giant luminarcs. I've got the smaller luminarcs. I've got probably 8 years of XM bulbs still in there.
Oh wow, I've got some Luminarcs too, but yeah, good to hoard metal halide bulbs. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. They shot me over a bunch years ago when they saw how popular some of the aquariums were becoming. They're like, "Hey, have some of these bulbs." So this tank's got the Ecotech Radions,
Okay.
which are amazing G5s. So I've got two G5, the XR30s, and then two of the XR15s. They are all
I'm
pros.
showing the pictures of the tank, by the way. It's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those are all pros. I tend to run my aquariums at a lighter spectrum, at a wider spectrum, you know, more towards the 10K. I've just always found I get better color and growth out of the corals going that route. So it's something I've always done, and it looks a little different. I don't like the, Sanjay calls it. What does Sanjay call it? The Windex aquariums
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
Smurf? Yeah, so I really like those colors. For flow, I've got the MP40s. I've got two of them in there, and I've also got a Tunzi Stream 3, which is a interesting little pump. I've got it hidden in the aquarium back behind the overflow, to the left side, so you can't really see it. It's positioned upwards, and it looks like looks almost like a little missile. It's so strange. You can set it up multiple ways, and even with just that pump by itself, with the amount of flow it pushes, it creates a gyre in the whole system.
So in rimless reef tanks, right?
Yep.
A lot of flow. Any issues in terms of spillage?
No, if you set up the the MP40s, I have to adjust them. I've got to keep them down at a certain level, but so long as they're at that level and I've got my overflow opened up correctly, I don't have any problems.
Gotcha.
No spillage, no issues. Um, for the return pump, I've got another Ecotech Vectra L2. So that's worked out pretty good. And then the skimmer, I've got the Ultramarine skimmer in there from Italy. Thing's kind of built like a tank.
Yes,
So
I've seen that. I actually saw that, I think, a couple of years ago at Reefapalooza in New York. Man, I was like,
yep,
wow, that thing is pretty
yeah,
freaking solid.
yeah. It was funny. I was looking at videos of Joe Berger because he's still, I don't know if he's still in the hobby, but maybe he had a video a couple years
Uh-huh.
ago and he was using the same skimmer. So I was like, all right, good enough for Joe, good enough for me. I'm gonna give it a shot.
So, did you mention calcium and alkalinity supplementation? What are you doing there?
So supplementation, I am doing the Tropic Marin All for Reef. I've been using that for 3 years now. Works out really well, and that's why I specifically only measure the alkalinity. When the tank was first set up, I set all my parameters, made sure everything was dialed in perfectly, and then from there, I've been dosing the additive in there. I dose 120 milliliters per day, and with their formulation, the way it works is I basically have to keep an eye on the alkalinity, and so long as that stays in line, that'll tell me, whether it's up or down, how much, where to dose, increase or decrease it from there. And it's worked true to its word. I haven't had to test anything else for the past year.
And interesting. So, and you're only testing alkalinity once a month.
Once a month. Yep.
Man. Mad Hatter's Reef. Hey, thanks, dude. Great work, Keith. Here's my down payment on a home wrecker. Cheers. Thanks for the super chat.
So I also dose Kalkwasser as well.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really have a reef anymore without Kalkwasser. You got to have it, man. That's like the secret sauce.
That is like, that's kind of like made a big resurgence in terms of the Kalkwasser. So
yeah, always had it.
Yeah, nice. So you're pH wise, what are you? What's your pH range?
I like to keep my pH high. I will target 8.4. It's hard to get to 8.4. Yeah. I'm generally around 8.1, 8.2. So I've got an airline into the skimmer. I've also got the Kalkwasser that's dosed in there through my top off to try to keep it up there. But yeah, it's huge. I think it's often overlooked. There's, you get these ranges thrown around where, be at 7.8 to 8.2. No, you want it up there. You want it 8.1, 8.2. From what I found, that's where you're going to get the growth, and that's where your corals are going to do best.
My pH is typically in the 8.2 to 8.4, sometimes the 8.5 range, and that's I think that is a great place to be in. And so, what else? You said you live in the in Michigan, right? So I'm assuming in the wintertime it could be cold, windows are shut. How do you keep the pH elevated in the wintertime?
Oh, yeah, it's still doing the same thing with the dumping a little more Kalkwasser or some, into the system. With the windows, I'll have to get creative with opening things up. The aquarium is down in the basement. I don't have a walk-in like yours down in there, but I've got sometimes pumping in some air. It'll get a little chilly in here, trying to free out the CO2. Try to maybe keep the kids out of here.
Yeah.
Everybody breathing up the breathing the air. But yeah, typically it will get closer to 7.9, 8.0 in the winter. So
certain reef, if you're testing that minimally, why not just test calcium, since I have heard the test kits are more accurate at measuring smaller changes? I mean, obviously I think alkalinity is a very important parameter to measure. Any reason you're not testing calcium? You just pretty much are trusting the All for Reef?
Yeah, I'm trusting the All for Reef, and I've, even back in the days when I had my other setups, I never really been somebody who tests really intensively. I'll keep an eye on my parameters, but it's not a thing where I'm testing it weekly or keeping. It's more I'm watching the corals, looking at the system, just based on observations. Just, I don't know, doing it for so long, I can kind of tell when things aren't doing exactly or not looking a certain way. I know it's kind of boneheaded sometimes because you want to try to catch the issue before it becomes a major problem, but it's, thus far it's worked out for me all these years.
No ICP testing?
No, I've never done
Really?
ICP.
No ICP testing?
I'm interested to try it. Some people have asked me, like, hey, why don't you run this ICP? I'd be very curious to see what kind of bacteria you have in your system, or what your parameters actually are, because I don't know exactly what, where my phosphate is, where my nitrate is.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I mean, that's a it's a very hands off kind of approach. What about have you ever had, over the years in your reef keeping career, any like you know common like episodes of RTN STN that were really problematic, or just the random one here or there?
I had random here or there. I don't think I've really ever lost an entire coral. I've been pretty quick at catching it, sniffing up the coral, fragging it if need be. I think a lot of my bacteria dosing and carbon dosing has actually helped just with the microbes and other things that are in there, because I know we haven't gotten into it yet, but I know a lot of the bacteria, people look at it as, for controlling nutrients, but it also helps with the corals. Some of the things they're doing now and they're checking with corals is they're testing, to see how the corals do and how they process, with the heat and other stresses that they have in their environment. And they're finding that even with probiotics and different things in the lab, that it's helping the corals become more resilient. And I found that in my systems as well, with the beneficial bacteria. So haven't really had any crazy episodes of any, STN, RTN. I think cyano and dinos were probably the worst thing I've ever dealt with.
So, all right, this is going to kind of like dovetail on a couple of different things here. One is the cyano and the dinos. I think we mentioned coral snow at the beginning of the show. What exactly is coral snow, and how can people learn more about it in the protocol?
All right, so coral snow, it's basically it's a flocculant calcium carbonate that I dose into my systems. I will dose it once a week to help maintain the water clarity and to combat cyano. Now you can find out more information on there. I've got a thread up on Reef to Reef. I've got a link on the Reef Site website, reefsite.com, and I've also got it on my Instagram. I've got a short 3-minute intro concerning the product and how to operate and use it. But the basic premise is, at least for cyano, is I know we were talking about this before, is if you have some cyano, what you're going to want to do with the protocol is siphon out the cyano first. Try to take out as much as you can. And after that, we're going to mix the calcium carbonate in with some bacteria, allow it to sit for 5 minutes once mixed, and then dose it in the system. And what I found is the bacteria will bind to the calcium carbonate. And once you dose the calcium carbonate into the system, it's going to bind, or it's going to end up on all the surfaces of the rock, of the glass, of the sand, and basically help to deliver the bacteria where it needs to be. And from there, it's going to help to outcompete the cyano for real estate. So it's really worked well for me.
So what about if you got the elevated nutrients, or let's say the cyano's been consuming all the nutrients? How does that impact the nutrients? Is that going to drop the nutrients when you start dosing that on a week? You said weekly basis?
Yeah, I dose mine on a weekly basis. I have, for some people, we've had some protocols where they've reached out to help eliminate the cyano. They've dosed it every 2 days, and it's worked out pretty well with their nutrients and with their system. It is going to pull out some nutrients, but not enough to make a huge difference on there. It's basically you're just trying to outcompete it for space in there. There's also other things, cyano is multifaceted. There's quite a few things that can cause it. So by no means is this a cure-all, but it seems to have worked pretty well for quite a few people.
Right. I mean, there's different strains of cyanobacteria, right? And some strains can be much tougher to eradicate versus other strains. What about tank blackouts? Have you ever tried doing tank blackouts? Is that like part of the protocol in terms of knocking it back before you start the calcium carbonate?
I haven't done anything with tank blackouts with cyano. I've done it with dinos in the past, and it's worked out well. A few people recently have commented on the large thread we have on Reef to Reef that it's worked out well for dinos, where they've done a blackout, they've thrown the flocculant, because depending on the dinos and what form it is, after you go into the blackout phase, the stuff is free floating. It's in the water. It's moving around. Right. And if you can have it bound up with the coral snow and then, taken out by your skimmer and then by some really fine filter socks, that seems to help knock it out.
Bill Boss, battling dinos now. 60-gallon doing 10 mLs Coral Snow, 10 mLs MB7, and 5 mLs of vodka daily. It's been 1 week, no luck so far. I guess there's different dinos and perhaps different successes that you would have depending on.
I'd probably scale back on the vodka. I wouldn't really want to throw any carbon source, especially vodka, because it's kind of indiscriminate with what it feeds. And that's a large reason why the carbon dosing I'm doing now, I've shied away from the vodka and sugar and whatnot and gone with the NP Bacto Balance from Tropic Marin, just because of what it's doing in there.
Salty Captain, what are your thoughts on ChemiClean?
I've used it years ago, and I mean, this stuff always comes back. I mean, it works really well in the beginning, but you just take a huge biological hit in the system. Corals will darken up. That's always been my experience. I'll have some brownouts. Things will come back, but I think it's a little heavy-handed, in my opinion.
For Minshew, yeah, and we talked about this. People use Coral Snow for vermitids as well.
Yep. Yeah, works out pretty well.
How does it impact vermitid snails? Again, does it kind of like mess with what they're secreting there?
Yeah, with their secretions when they come out, if they're pulling their nets back in, I believe it's filling up their tubes. At least from some of the ones I've broken in my system, I found quite a bit of calcium carbonate built up in there. So after a little while, they reduce the frequency of casting out their nets. And now it's really rare for me to ever see the nets out these days, especially with the amount of snow I dose per week.
What are the potential downsides? Are there any risks to this protocol, Coral Snow?
None that I've experienced. Biologic or chemically, there could be some. Randy Holmes Farley on Reef to Reef has commented there may be some issues concerning your alkalinity depending on how much you dose. So when you are dosing it, I would recommend a small amount. My system volume is about 170 gallons total, and I'll dose 1 tablespoon per week in there to keep it going and keeping it well. Some others, they'll dose quite a bit more. They'll dose 5-10 times the amount without any issues, but it's hard to say. Hard to say in the system. It's really, your mileage will vary, but I've been using it I've used it for many years now, no issues. I used to buy the commercial form of it maybe 15 years ago, and just decided over the past few years, why am I spending all this money on this commercially when I can just do my own for $15, so to speak.
And what was the other? And you're doing this for maintenance, man. I mean, you don't even have like cyano, and you're just doing this weekly just to keep the cyano at bay, or anything else for that matter. Dinos as well, perhaps.
Cyano, dinos, just to keep a tank looking clear, looking good. It does a wonderful job of water clarity. You can see in some of the images I had up there.
Do you use UV sterilizer?
No.
No. Okay, no UV.
No UV, no ozone.
Activated carbon.
Yep, activated carbon.
Okay.
I use the what's that stuff from BRS? Is it the ROX? 0.8.
Yeah. Yep.
That stuff works really well.
High capacity or something.
Yep, high capacity. I'll change out 1 cup every 2 weeks in my system.
Gotcha. How did you come up with this protocol, man? I mean, you're like trying to come up with a better mousetrap, and there was stuff out there that just you didn't like ChemiClean, obviously, and there was other things that just weren't working that you just
it's kind of been around for a little bit, with a few different formulations. You read about on other sites, other companies, Zeovit for the longest time, they've got a product, Coral Snow, and one of their protocols for doing it was adding the bacteria to their Coral Snow formulation. So it's very similar to what I dose into my systems here, and it's worked out pretty well.
All right, man. So let's talk about carbon dosing, and you were kind of like one of the pioneers of this method in terms of kind of controlling nutrients by dosing bacteria. Can you kind of explain the origin of all that and how you happened upon that, and I guess we can kind of dive deeper once you've kind of laid that groundwork.
Yeah, the carbon dosing it's kind of interesting. First started to look around, read about it. There was a few reefers, on the fringes there. A lot of the guys especially in Germany, there's a lot of people over there that were getting into it and dosing it into their system. So kind of read some articles, happened upon it. And, the way I like to experiment a lot, I like to play around with my systems, like to push the envelope a bit. And it was just something I wanted to try just to try to control my nutrients. So I started messing around with some of the bacteria. I think back then, 05, 06, it was Protobio.
Yeah.
It had those little glass
Yeah.
vials. And I was dosing the bacteria and wanted to give a little bit of a kick. And so I'd read a few things about the carbon and different forms of it, and started trying out sugar. Sugar was okay. It just gave me a little too much cyano, some brown jelly issues in there. So I kind of moved away from that. Ended up doing the vodka, and the vodka worked out really well, almost a little too well in the system.
Supercharged things.
Yeah, supercharged, helped out really well. And the one benefit I wasn't expecting, I was using it to reduce the nutrients, was the coral growth. I mean, the corals exploded, the SPS in the system, just with the available amount of bacteria that was, suddenly floating
Yeah.
around, all that phosphate bound up in the bacteria. I mean, the corals were just eating it up. So I started dosing that, doing that, and then I had a thread going on ReefCentral, and quite a few people took notice based on how clean the system looked, the coral growth. I mean, because it's hard to find that balance of having a
Yeah.
really clean system and having the coral growth. I mean, you walk a really fine line. And so did that. We spread it out, and it kind of took off from there. Just started, laying it out. It was like we said, we're in a few different magazines, Coral Magazine. Put a little article out with them, and kind of went from there.
So today, what are you doing in terms of bacteria dosing? Is that part of your weekly protocol with coral snow, or are you doing coral snow once a week plus daily bacteria dosing?
Yeah. So my daily protocol is I'll add 3 milliliters of the MP Bactobalance from Tropic Marin. That's my carbon source daily. The bacteria is added twice a week, and it's really a small amount. I use Zeobac. I was using Microbacter 7 for a while, and was getting some brown buildup that was coming up on the rock. I don't know what it was, so I switched to bacterias, and the Zeobac doesn't seem to give me that. So it's worked out pretty well, and I'll dose that twice a week, and then I'll dose the All for Reef daily, and then the Coral Snow on once a week on Saturday, and that's basically it. That's going in the system.
Right. And so, what are your thoughts in terms of the opinion? And we've had multiple conversations on this live stream about dosing bacteria in terms to an established reef tank, and in terms of, is that necessary, is that beneficial? And I guess one benefit is what you talked about is nutrient control, right? It helps control nitrates and phosphates. But so what I've heard people say is that once you dose a source of bacteria, a certain strain of bacteria to the tank, that bacteria will multiply in the tank. So it's really not necessary to keep dosing that same type of bacteria. Do you agree with that thinking, or are you pretty much doing the bacteria dosing just for nutrient control?
I see. The thing is, I'm kind of doing it because it's kind of a silly answer, but it's kind of the way I've always done it. But at the same time, the filtration nowadays and in these systems with the skimmers and everything else we're doing is so aggressive. It is pulling out quite a bit of the bacteria, and at the same time, the corals, they're uptaking quite a bit of bacteria in the system, sometimes faster than it can reproduce. So, I think I mentioned it the other day to somebody on one of the forums. We were talking about adding the bacteria and putting it into the systems and why I'm doing it. And really, I mean, for the cost of it, I think it's $70 a year is what it came down to with bacteria. It's working for me. I don't think twice about it. I just dose it in there. It's worked out well. I don't see any reason to change it. The science is interesting, but I'm kind of doing what works for me.
Yeah. Well, that's that's true with a lot of things with reef keeping. I mean, I can't explain exactly everything that I'm doing, but if it's working, then why change? But I mean, obviously people have different opinions, and there's many different ways to keep a reef tank. So there's not a right or wrong answer, really.
No, and with the reef keeping, I'll try to work things out, do things. And then, hey, if it works, I'll keep doing it, and then I'll go back and try to figure out, okay, reverse engineer it. Why'd this work? How did it work? And if I can figure it out, great. I'll put it out there and tell others about it. And if I can't, well.
So, are you concerned at all that, like, a lot of the bottle bacteria that we do, is I'm not sure there's any bottle bacteria out there that actually lists the bacteria in those bottles. Is that problematic in your eyes?
No. I mean, there's a lot of potions out there, the MP Bacto Balance. with what I use with that. I don't know exactly what's in there. I know that from listening to Lou over at Tropic Marine and what they have in there, that they're long chain polymers. I couldn't tell you what that is. It sounds really nice, but yeah, there's just quite a few things. Even in the buckets of salt, things I have in there. I don't know every single mineral, every single element that's really in there. It's just formulations that I kind of trust the scientists to put in there, and then through trial and error, if it works, I'll keep on doing it.
What about other types of coral food? Do you do any other supplementation, amino acids, that sort of thing?
I'll add zero food, and that's a small amount added twice a week. I'll add it with the bacteria, and I believe that's a form of amino acids with their formulation. It's basically 14 drops a week, so it's not a huge amount, but it's been helping in there. One thing I've done different in this system that I haven't done in the past ones is I've got a zeolite reactor in there with zeolite stones. I've always just been interested in it and wanted to give it a shot, and the magic rocks, and it's this stuff really works. It works quite well, and the biggest benefit I found is not the nutrient reduction. It's the coral growth. Coral growth has been incredible because once a day I'll go in there, I'll stir up the rocks. I'll get this giant storm of bacteria. I've got some videos on my Instagram on there that show this storm of complete cloud in the system. And you'll see the corals just open up, go out there, tentacles out, feeding, and it's been great. I use half the recommended dose, change it, every 60 days. They recommend every 30 days, but it's worked out well for me. I'm not really looking for the nutrient reduction from it, but it's been really, really good. And that's my primary source of coral food.
Have you ever tried like any live types of food like phytoplankton?
No, maybe in the past I've done the thing where I've had little baby clams. I've taken them out, put them in a little dish, have them eat up all the phyto, put them back in, nursed them up. But once they've gotten to a certain size, no, I've really haven't dosed much of that.
Phil Boss is asking, have you tried hydrogen peroxide? I assume the question is, have you used that to battle anything like dinos or cyano or anything like that nature?
Yeah, I've used that in the past to I think the only thing I saw was it raised the ORP when I was measuring it back in the days. So I don't know if it was doing much. It might have been doing a little more harm than good sometimes. I've dipped some zoos and things like that,
Yeah, Sean, maybe someone need to come up with a good smaller reactor. Hard to find a good one in terms of the zeolite reactor. I've never tried that myself.
Yeah, the reactor is quite large. It's a bit clunky in there. It works really well, but yeah, somebody needs to come up with something a little more friendly for these systems.
Paul Greatbeard of Reef, yeah, he said he uses protibio sometimes as a bacteria. How do you pronounce that? Prodibio?
I think it's protobio.
Protobio. Okay. Yeah, that's I've never used that stuff, but I know some other veteran reef keepers have used that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Yep, and Paul's reminding everybody, let's hit the like button. Yeah, we got almost 85 people watching right now, only 31 likes. So if we can goose that number up a little bit, that would be an awesome. More people will find us. Back to carbon dosing. What? How careful do you need to be to make sure that you don't go overboard and have that situation where you're just overcharging the bacteria and causing a rapid drop in nutrients? How do you know that line?
Yeah, you've got to go really slow. When you're starting out with the protocol, with the vodka or with the MP Bacto or with whatever you're doing, I tell most people when they're starting up is go, whatever is recommended, start at 10% and slowly, raise it up 5% per week. Do it really slow. It's going to take you a while. It's going to take you, maybe 3 months to get to where the doses that you need it to be at. But you just don't want it. There's too much harm you can do. Dosing it too quickly. These days, I do recommend that people kind of steer away from, the vodka, the sugar, and just even the vinegar, because they can do a lot of harm. And that's to look at certain products, like a lot of the carbon dosing. I know Red Sea's got their no pox.
Yeah.
I think it's similar. Tropic Marin's got their own formulation, and these formulations, they work much better because they're specifically targeting the bacteria and not the things, not cyano or the Bryopsis or any of the other things that can eat it up.
Bryopsis. What have you done in the past for Bryopsis?
I only had it one time. I had it way back like 2001, 2002, and then since then I've been fortunate, and it was the old school way. I took all the rock,
Yeah.
scrubbed them, put them back in. Yeah. I usually tend to keep tangs, fox faces, different other creatures in there. I have a nice cleanup crew to kind of keep that stuff at bay.
Yeah, so I was showing some of the pictures of the fish in your systems. You a lot of Anthias, Chromis, Tangs. That's I kind of have a similar taste in terms of the. I love the color of the Lartel Anthias and the green Chromis. I think it's just a really cool look. It's tough though, and for me at least, in terms of keeping those things long term. It seems like they eventually kind of like wither away in terms of the schools of those things.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've never had that issue, and I've gotten quite a few people. Anytime I posted images or videos or pictures of this aquarium, they're like, "Man, how do you keep all these chromuses? Hey, they're gonna kill each other. Hey, they're gonna fight." And I've never had that problem, and I kept thinking about it. I'm like, man, am I really lucky? What's going on? And I thought about it, and I've always had large schools of Anthias with the chromis, and then just observationally watching the fish. I did it weeks back, and anytime the chromises would think about even nipping at each other, one of the Anthias would jump in, and so they're much more worried about the Anthias than they are each other.
What's your routine in terms of feeding the fish, and how often, and what are you feeding them?
Yeah, I'll feed them twice a day. Spectrum pellets and Formula One flakes. I'll throw some frozen mysid shrimp in there in the evening, just 2 cubes because I have a copper band butterfly. But otherwise, I would only feed Spectrum pellets and flakes. That's what I've been doing for years.
Interesting. Vivid Creative Aquatics. What's your opinion on biopellets as a form of carbon dosing? I used to use it in a previous tank with good success, but decided not to on the current tank.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I couldn't dial it in right. I tried it once years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and I couldn't get the flow right through the reactor. I was just having all sorts of issues. Cyano was popping up. It was so much easier just to dose the carbon daily by hand.
Gotcha. So we've talked a lot, Sunny, about the way you like to keep tanks and all that stuff. What would you say has been like the biggest change in terms of methods that you've used to keep a reef tank over the years? Obviously your tank lighting has changed, right, from TFOS halides to LEDs, and you've been always leaning on bacteria dosing. Anything else that we haven't talked about that you kind of have changed up a little bit in terms of your methods?
No, I mean not a whole lot of it has changed. I've kind of kept the same solid guidelines and the bedrock of what I do. All the lighting, heavy flow, the bacteria. I just when I came back to the hobby, I'd noticed that quite a few things had changed. Suddenly, aquariums were being started up with dead rock, which blew my mind. Yeah. I tried it when I was trying to come back in. I'm like, yeah, let me give this a shot. I didn't have any live rock left. I didn't have anything going on. I failed miserably.
Me too.
I'm somebody who has a ton of experience, and the tank just dinos and problems. I was like, this is ridiculous. So, reached out to who was it? KP Aquatics down at the Gulf. They pulled some fresh live rock out of the ocean, 15 pounds or so. I put it in the sump, put the dead rock in the main display. Everything migrated from the sump into the main tank. Everything came alive. Rock solid. Didn't have any problems, no issues. Beautiful. I don't that part I just don't get. I think people they're too afraid of hitchhikers and other things jumping into the aquarium, where it's not that big of a problem, honestly. You do much more harm than good.
Yeah, I did fail miserably myself when I tried to start a dry rock only tank, and I completely rebooted it. But it sounds like you were able to save the dry rock only tank by adding some live rock to it, which is great, because when you put it in the sump, I don't think you have to worry as much about those hitchhikers getting to the display.
No, no, I caught those manna shrimp pretty quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got like 100 pounds of the KP Aquatics live rock that I started my Peninsula tank with, and
Yep.
I had a couple of mantis shrimp in there. One actually made it into the tank, but luckily there was no corals in the tank. I saw it. It was on a rock that was on the top of the reef,
Yeah.
so I was able to pull it out and flush them out. I didn't kill them. I gave them to a local fish store, and I made sure they understood what I was giving them. But I think there was a lot of pistol shrimp in there, and
Yep.
I think they're kind of harmless. I still might have a pistol shrimp or two, but it's and a couple of bad acro crabs that made it through. I was doing their recommended high salinity dip to
Yeah.
flush out all the stuff you didn't want
Shot all
there.
the nasties.
Sean, maybe I have a small batch of rock coming tomorrow from KP Aquatics. Can't wait. Yeah, it's good stuff. Really, really good stuff. Talk to us, Phil Boss. Dry rock and sand is probably why my tank started off with dinos. Yeah. Talk to us
Yeah.
about your sand beds. So you mentioned that the sand beds, clean sand bed. What's your method there in terms of keeping that sand so crystal clear?
Yeah, that's generally every 1 to 2 weeks when I go in there. Every Saturday is my maintenance day, and I'll go in there. I'll siphon out the sand bed. So generally it takes only about 10 minutes. I'll get a gravity fed siphon. I'll attach the outlet to a filter sock, stick that in the sump, vacuum out the sand, and capture everything I can, dump it out of the filter sock, and then input the coral snow to catch anything that's free floating in the system. And it's worked out great for me. It's I don't know if somebody's got some magic method of keeping their sandbag clean without maintaining it. I would love to know. So many bad things can form up in there. I posted some images on the Instagram of there was one time where I went maybe a month without doing it just because of work and travel. And I mean, the water was black coming out of the sand
Oh,
bed. So
really?
you can imagine over time what that can do, building up and leaching things out and causing all sorts of problems and issues. I like having a sand bed. I tried in the past to do bare bottom. I don't know, things weren't buffered correctly. It just the whole system was off when I didn't have sand in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've recently been a convert to bare bottom, tanks, and that's more about the flow and the fact that I just keep shitty sand beds because my
Yeah.
sand beds just look awful. It's like a repository for all the crap that corals breaking
Yeah.
off and dead snails and all. I just never was really like into maintaining them, and so yeah, they're detritus traps. But do you have a like any cleanup crew critters in there, or is it you're the one that's doing all the work?
I'm doing a lot of the light work. I've got hermit crabs in there. I've got snails, of course, going around. I've got bumblebee snails that were helping to deal with some of the fermented snails that were in there. Quite a few pods, anthiopods. I dosed them one time. I believe I got them from reefcleaners.org. He's got some really good strain of stuff over there, and only had to do the pods once. I'll probably do it again pretty soon. Seems like dosing them once a year works out well, but in God, a matter of 2 months, they just exploded in the system. And those little guys, they do a really good job in there. I mean, I think that they're overlooked and they're backbone in quite a few systems if you got them in
Yep.
there. Yeah.
Rob upstate New York. Hey, thanks, man, for that super chat comments. Cheers to a great chat. Appreciate that. Um, Benjamin Bean, I got all my rock from Tampa Bay salt water, and it's great. 2 months of full tank.
Yep.
Acro's looking great. Yeah, that's another option is Tampa Bay salt water.
Yeah, they are pretty.
What was I going to ask you about the sand bed? So siphoning out the sand bed weekly basis. Yeah, it's yeah. I just try to like I pretty much dig the no sand thing because of the all the flow that I got going on my tank. And it started because of my Peninsula tank, and that's a
Yeah.
challenge to I never even thought about really considered too seriously having a sand bed in that tank because it's a 6 foot long tank. I was like, man, I need to blast from both ends. So I just don't think the sand's going to
Yep.
be working out. But I guess I could have, I could have always used a coarse type of, almost like a calcium reactor media type of sand bed.
Yeah, I use the seafloor, Carib Sea seafloor special grade.
Yeah.
That's the sand I've always used. it's uniform. It works really well, and I've just got to position my pumps a certain way so that the sand doesn't blow around. But I think I was telling you 120 times per hour is my flow in there, so stuff's moving.
Yeah.
It's just positioning everything correctly. It can take some time. It can be tedious.
So, Sonny, you obviously have a lot of people that reach out to you for advice, and you're busy on the forums and stuff like that. What would you say is like the best advice, or some good nuggets of advice to give people that want to kind of get to that next level in terms of keeping SPS?
That's kind of the same things that are said over and over again. Is be patient. Is let nature take its course. Don't overthink. Don't chase the numbers. Just there's clear guidelines out there for setting up aquariums. There's clear parameters, clear things to do to start it up. I mean, so many have come before, us, before these new reefers coming in. Follow some of those measures. Like you were saying at the start of the podcast here, is find a mentor, find an aquarium you want to emulate, and kind of follow from there. Ask those questions and see where they started and how they're going. I think I was talking about it earlier. Is too many people, they overthink. They're doing too much. You've probably experienced it too, where you keep the more you have your hands in the aquarium, the more things are going to be going wrong. The more things you're busting up, the more problems you're having. And my systems do really well by just leaving them alone. I do my normal maintenance, clean the glass every few days. Saturday, I do the normal stuff, and do my water changes every 6 weeks or so, and it's
So
worked out well.
you're doing, what did you say, 25% every 6 weeks?
Yeah, every 6 weeks, 25%. The first 6 months, I was doing it every single week, just getting the tank going, trying to see how it was. And then I kind of scaled it back to every 2 weeks, and then now I've gotten to every 6 weeks without any problems or issues. So I'll probably continue doing it that way.
Salt? Did we talk about the salt you use?
Yeah, reef crystals, same stuff I've been using forever. I've never never had a reason to change. Same thing I've been using since the start. There's all sorts of other formulations, but if it isn't broke, why change it?
What about other like pieces of equipment? Controllers. Are you the type that has a lot of control going on in the tank? Are you just
No,
monitors, or no?
no. I get all the time. I get people asking, "Hey, I want to see a picture of your sump, or I want to see images of what you got under the tank," and they're usually disappointed. There's not much going on down there. It's everything's in the tank. I dose everything manually. I get up in the morning, I do my thing. It's, by the time I get to the aquarium, lights turn on at 7 a.m. I'll dose the alpha reef. I'll dose the carbon source, the MP Bacto balance. I'll feed the fish, go on with my day. The only thing that's really monitoring is I've got a small controller that heaters are plugged into,
Right.
because that's very important. And I've got a monitor for the pH to keep an eye out on that. But that's it. I don't have anything else controlling the stuff. The lights and the pumps, of course, are controlled by the Mobius on the app, but try to keep it simple. Less things can go wrong that way.
So you're not the type that's out there looking for new product innovations and all that sort of thing. You're just bare bones.
Yeah, I've had a few other companies and startups and reef companies asking me about some input about certain things to use and if I wanted to test things out, and I've kind of said, no, I really like the way I'm doing my stuff, keeping it nice and simple. It's working for me. Maybe in the future, if time becomes at a premium and I want it to monitor a bit more, I just feel like I'm going to get into a lot more trouble if I know every single parameter and every little thing that's going on in there. I'm just going to want to tinker with it too much.
Right. Like you're, I mean, it's like an information overload type of thing, right? And
It is.
It's good to have the information. The problem is that if things are not going well with the tank, then there might be a tendency to act on all that information without a lot of focus, I guess, maybe is the way to put it.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about, so what about the future for you in terms of any desires to have a bigger tank, to take it to another level? Obviously you've been in the hobby for a long time, and you've had big tanks, you've had some smaller tanks, and you kind of like restarted with a semi-big tank. Do you have a vision of going bigger again at some point down the road?
Yeah, it's going to really depend on this real estate market for it to pick up. I'm going to need a bigger place. things are kind of rough out there with the housing market. You know, there's not really much available. So once I do get the space and things clear up a bit, I do plan on getting into a bigger home and getting a larger aquarium set up. I seen a few things out there. I want to try something different. Next one, I think I'm going to go around a fully walk around sphere.
Wow.
That's really what I really want to do something like that. Something just, you know, different, never done before, at least from my end, and things you don't typically see in the hobby.
A walk around spear. So what does that look like? I mean, that's basically a like a circular tank.
Yeah, circular tank. Yeah, exactly. It's a little different, but it's, you know, I've got some ideas in my head, and you know the way you're going to have it set up, and how the overflow is going to work. So I've got a couple things I've been bouncing around on some people, just so that we don't have any large obstructions in the center and whatnot. So
That's not going to be rimless, though, man.
no, it won't be rimless. So yeah, I'll have to create a small one out there to have that going to keep the rimless alive.
Well, yeah, I mean the looks in your tanks in terms of those rimless reefs are just I mean, and it kind of like your this is version 4 of the rimless reef.
Yeah, version 4. Yep.
So you had the ReefCentral tank of the month, which was the in-wall tank, and then you went rimless right after that.
Yep, that was the first rimless. That was 100-gallon. That was heavily carbon dosed. And then the second rimless was the larger one that went down after I was ill. The third rimless was right when I was getting back into it, and that was the one that I started up with the dead rock and the dead sand and everything else, and that one didn't work out too well. So that one kind of died in the vine, and then I kind of waited another couple of years and jumped up to this big one. So this is
we've been talking. We talked a little bit about the pro corals, you know, the PC Rainbow and the PC Superman table. What about some non-PC corals that you dig, man? Like, what are your favorites out there that are corals that you haven't brought in yourself?
You know, I don't chase them too much anymore. You know, kind of the when I was doing the pro corals, it kind of killed some of that fever for me. The collecting fever, because
the name game thing, kind of like.
You know, it was fun collecting the corals, tracking them down. Especially back in the days, they were hard to track down. They weren't available, you know, on websites everywhere. So that was part of the fun of it, you know, like almost like collecting baseball cards. And then when I suddenly had access to all these corals and all these things at once, it kind of diluted the hobby a bit for me. With collecting them. But if I'm going to name some favorites, I really like the classic Purple Monster, Tyree Purple Monster. That's one of my favorites. I'd love to get another piece of that. I had one in the original in-wall, and it was beautiful. Super slow growing, but beautiful piece. Strawberry Fields, I love that piece. I like a lot of the old school stuff. I like, you know, the OG, you know, Green Slimer.
Yeah. That's a green Slimer right behind you, right?
Yep, Green Slimer right there. Grows like a weed. You know, I like digis. I like those as well, like little purple digi in there, orange digi, green digi. These days, my taste is pretty basic. I don't really chase down anything anymore. I just really want something that's going to have a nice color, good growth form, and those are my deciding factors these days.
Caps too, right? You're into caps.
Yeah, I like caps. Not as big as I had in the in-wall. That thing was a monster.
Yeah, that was a huge orange cap.
Yeah, I think it was monstrous. Thankfully, this one here, I have to turn it back every month or so, but it's more there, you know, just for visual looks. I'm not really letting it grow out too much.
Yeah, Purple Monster. I have I have a piece that I'm growing out. You know, it's super slow grower for me right now. You know, the piece that I had years ago in Connecticut was really a fast grower for me, and you know, I had it under halides and T5s back then, and I've got it under halides and right now, and it's growing a lot slower. I've got a frag of it also in my LED lit tank, and that's got better color, but it's also still a slow grower. I mean, the problem with that, you know, in terms of putting that in a display tank, is that eventually other corals will encroach upon it or shade it out. So
yeah,
that's a challenge, because what it likes to do is encrust, and so that's kind of and it's not a easy coral to frag.
no, that was always a tough part, and you know, you kind of hit on something with the coral selection when you're setting up an aquarium. I don't think a lot of people think about that these days with the way they grow. You know, the like for instance, where the Slimer is situated. You're gonna put the Slimer in a certain spot versus say a tabling coral or millie. Same thing I do with the digis, things that grow, at least for me, much quicker. I'm gonna kind of keep them up to the outskirts, and put them that way, just because I know that they're gonna be taken off. Certain mixture of colors. So yeah, these days just all about the growth, colors of the corals, not so much about the names anymore, like I did in the past, because it can get pretty intense chasing those things down. I know some people go nuts with it, but then you end up with that whole fruit stand look.
Yeah. Great Bearded Reef. ReefBum has one for sale, $1 million. She's talking about Purple Monster in a
Oh,
Doctor
is it $1 million?
Dr. Evil voice.
That thing is awesome. But yeah, big shout out if you guys don't have it yet. Get the PC Rainbow or get the PC Superman
Yeah,
table. Reef Bum.
yeah.
Beautiful pieces.
Those are awesome pieces. What did I already ask you this question? What are some other PC corals?
Those were the two big ones.
Yeah.
I've Battle Corals has still got my Sunset Millie.
Yes. Yes.
The Sunny Sunset Millie.
Yeah.
That thing was
I love
that thing
that.
is wild. Yeah, I've got a piece of it in here, and that thing just has this amazing coloration and look. It's almost this yellowish, orangish, metallic color. So he's got a piece of it on his site, and he says it sells pretty well.
Yeah, I think I got that from him, but I lost that piece. But I've got a couple other Sunset Millies, but I got the. You're talking about Adam, right? So I've got I've got his. What do you call it? The schizophrenic or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That one. I had that for like a long time, and it's just encrusted. Didn't like sprout any branches. Got encroached upon by some other corals. And then when I rebooted my 187-gallon tank, I took out the encrusted rock that it was on, and I just chiseled off a piece, and I put it on a tile. And now it's starting to sprout some branches. So
nice.
I might be able to take a little frag of that and stick it in one of my display tanks again. But I don't know, maybe it'll just start encrusting again.
Yeah, Adam's a good dude. He's got some really nice pieces out there. He was one of the first guys and vendors out there that got some of the PC corals when I was first putting them out. So yeah, we had traded for a bunch of equipment. He had a bunch of stuff he was trying to trade. I'm like, all right, I'll trade you some corals for them.
Oh,
got a bunch
nice.
of haloid equipment. Yeah.
What was somebody else? Oh yeah. Crumb de Dum, don't see many purple caps anymore. I used to have a purple cap that I had next to an orange cap and an orange cap, and a green cap, and that was like a really cool look. Like multicolored caps. That's
wrapped them in there. Yeah, the purple cap was a Langsai.
Yes, the purple rim,
beautiful.
Or the green rim, purple cap, right? Oh no,
I think it was green. It was green with a purple.
Right, green with a purple rim. Yeah.
That thing grew like a weed, though. That's the problem with the caps. Is they're beautiful, but you need a very large system for them.
Yeah, I have. I took like a 4 or 5 inch frag of an orange cap that I put at the end of my peninsula tank, and now it is taking up a large amount of real estate. My clowns have decided to host it, so it's pretty cool. I mean, it's like multi-layer, and it's serving a purpose because it's coral and it's helping to absorb the nutrients in the tank, so it's good. I love it. It's beautiful. It's orange. It's bright orange. I mean, that's my thing. I love brightly colored corals.
The corals are growing. They're doing well. It's really good until they start, messing with your flow and eating up all your elements and whatnot. And that's a lot of people don't really plan for that. Everybody wants their corals to grow and take off, but what do you do when they're, becomes a big chore?
Sean maybe said like Adam's fish poop coral. Yeah, and Great Bird of Reef is pointing out it's Adam's fairy food. I think that's what he's got listed for $1 million on his website. What any favorites from Adam?
Nothing really comes to mind. I've got a few of my pieces on there. I don't know if I've got any of his stuff in there. I really don't have anything really named in this system. I've got the standard digis. I've got the standard, Slimers. I've got the Red Planet. There's a Pearlberry in there. But
Love
everything
the
in my system is,
Pearlberry.
it's all old school stuff, and that's what I like. It's everything that was added in there was purchased locally. It's cheap. Popped them in there. They look good. Just stuff I'm familiar with. It's really hard to follow a lot of the corals that are out there these days with the wild colors.
So no home wreckers or Walt Disney's for
you? No. They would just get lost in the shuffle. I mean, I'm more about the entire system, about the thing as a whole. than as the individual corals.
So when you were running pro corals and bringing in, some of the, were you bringing in wild corals too besides the mariculture, or just mariculture?
Yeah, there was wild corals coming in. The PC Superman, that was a wild coral. And believe it or not, it's the SPS did well for me, but the thing where I sold the most were zoanthids.
Oh, really?
Yeah, zoanthids were just crazy, especially the rastas. People back then, they loved them. They couldn't get enough of them. And they were all the rage. I don't know how big they are these days. They've gone through many iterations. We've had zoanthids and acans at one point, and then chalices, and I don't even know what the rage is now.
I didn't notice.
Is it bubble corals?
Yeah, it might be the bounce mushrooms. Yeah. That's a big thing. I didn't notice. Do you have any zoas in the tank?
Yeah, I've got them down at the bottom. I keep them down to fill them some space. Every system I've had has had zoanthids in there, so I've got the rastas. I've got the utter chaos. I've got maybe some jokers, a few different things in there. Eagle eye. I think some bam bams. Whatever my local reef shop has.
You're throwing out a lot of the names down there, huh?
Yeah. Those guys are named down there. I don't think you can find any no-name zoanthids. I'd be a little worried about putting some of those guys in there. I've gotten a taste of some of that before, and it doesn't feel good. Make you quite sick.
No, I've never had. Well, I've probably had them in my tanks at some point in time. The paleys, but zoanthids. Before I rebooted my tank, man, I had a couple of different zoanthids, and they just went hog wild in that tank and carpeted the floor and just ran up the rocks and all that stuff. What a pain in the ass. You got to keep on. You got to keep on that stuff. Yeah. Or else it's just overwhelm everything. And LPS in the tank, you've got some nice mix in terms of the, not a lot, but.
I've got a small frog spawn in there that's been growing, but other than that, no, nothing really to speak of on the LPS front.
Gotcha. So Sunny, man, anything else that we missed that you wanted to mention? We kind of dove deeper into the carbon dosing stuff and the coral snow.
No, it seems like the carbon dosing is really starting to come back. It was a little gone for a little while. You're seeing it featured in a lot of areas again, and I think it's definitely worth looking at, especially with the different filtration methods you can do nowadays. I've kind of done it all from refugiums to turf scrubbers to you name it, to run the GFO and the pile pellets and whatnot. And the easiest and the most advantageous method I've found has been carbon dosing. It's just so much easier than having to trim the refugium, do the scrubber, mess with anything else.
Right, and so you're not adding any other kind of traces other than the stuff you mentioned. No individual trace elements.
Yeah, I've got it on my Instagram. I've got a little spot pinned up there with my dosages. The All for Reef will add just about everything I need in there.
So remind folks how to find you on Instagram. Is it reefsite.com? Is that what it is?
Yep, I'm at ReefSite, so ReefSite. So you can find me on Instagram on there or on Facebook under the same handle. I don't have much posted up on YouTube. I plan on adding some more stuff in the future, maybe a few how-tos. I've had a number of people asking about that. So if I can get the time, I definitely want to do that. Won't be anything as polished up as your stuff, but it'll be up there. And then I'm also I go by Sunny X on the Reef forums, so I've got a number of threads and things going on over there on Reef to Reef. So you can always find me hanging out there. Great group of people over there,
including the protocol for the coral snow.
Yep, doing the protocol. There's a whole 40+ page thread going on there.
All right, man. I'm gonna have to read through that, and I'll reach out to you with any questions on that. But just got some stubborn cyano that been fighting there, and it's always an interesting battle with cyano. But sounds like some folks have had some pretty good success with that method. So
yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
All right, dude. Well, listen, Sunny, thank you so much for taking some time to share your story here in terms of the reef keeping and the journey. So we really appreciate having you on, and definitely see a lot of people we're digging the conversation. So thanks, man. And just also want to thank the sponsors for the show, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I also want to thank all you folks out there for tuning in and contributing to the conversation. And also a big thank you to Paul, the moderator, who is also the president of the Boston Reefer Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. And finally, I also want to let you know that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. So my next Rappin With ReefBum episode will be on Thursday, July 13th, next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Tony Vargas, who is an author, lecturer, consultant, and a self-described reefaholic. So that should be another great show. If you want to check out the full upcoming schedule of guests, go to reefbum.com under the YouTube section. So until then, be safe and be well. We will see you next time. Later.